However, what I've said to my counterpart is that presidents come and go, as do political leaders of all stripes. And fundamentally, at its base, Alberta and Montana have a strong relationship. Canada is Montana's largest trading partner. So Montana exported about $1 billion worth of stuff to Canada last year. And Montana, in terms of imports from Canada, that number is almost 5.6 billion. So there is a very strong, healthy relationship between those two jurisdictions.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today, we spotlight an international trade agreement that over a year ago set out to unlock new opportunities, strengthen industries, and forge lasting economic ties across borders. This journey began with the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between Economic Development Lethbridge and the Great Falls Development Alliance. Now, this agreement united two mid-sized economic powerhouses, Lethbridge, Alberta, and Great Falls, Montana, both strategically positioned on either side of the Canada-U.S. border. Recognizing the deep economic interconnections between their regions, particularly in food production, agriculture, bioprocessing, and energy, the two cities embarked on an ambitious effort to work together for mutual growth. Now, as we come up to the first full year of this MOU, we ask ourselves, what progress has been made? What challenges have surfaced? And most importantly, what lies ahead in year two? Now, to understand the foundation of this partnership, it's essential to recognize the broader trade relationship between Canada and the United States, each other's largest trading partner. Lethbridge and Great Falls, situated within an agriculturally rich corridor, share business synergies that span trade routes, investment strategies, and industry expertise. By formalizing their relationship, EDL and GDEFA have aimed to create a structured framework for collaboration, one that supports business expansion, market exploration, and position this corridor as the premier hub for industry growth. The MOU set forth several key initiatives within it. Biannual cross-border visits allowed business leaders and policymakers to exchange insights and witness firsthand the innovations driving economic success in both cities. Joint promotional efforts at industry trade shows elevated their visibility, attracting potential investors who might not have otherwise considered these locations. And perhaps most symbolically, both organizations committed to incorporating their partnership into media strategies, reinforcing the idea that success in one community benefits the other. Now, of course, no partnership is without its challenges. Economic shifts, evolving global trade dynamics, and unexpected disruptions such as supply chain issues and border restrictions have tested the resilience of this alliance. Yet through these obstacles, the collaboration seems to have remained strong. Now, at the MOU signing last May, Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, and Brett Donnie, President and CEO of GFDA, expressed their excitement about jointly marketing the Great Falls Lethbridge corridor as a prime location for expansion. Today, we welcome Brett and Trevor as they share their insights into this evolving trade partnership, the progress made so far, and what the future holds for both organizations. Across Canada, our cities, towns, villages, and rural communities are alive with stories waiting to be told. Stories of innovation and economic development, resilience in the face of the housing challenges, and the financial hurdles municipalities overcome every day. At the Cross Border Network, we bring these stories to life. From coast to coast to coast, we're connecting Canadians to the issues shaping our communities and showcasing the people working tirelessly to make them thrive. With your support, we can expand our reach, amplify more voices, and shine a light on the challenges and triumphs of municipal life. For as little as $3.99 a month, you can help us grow and continue sharing the stories that matter most. Join us today and be part of this important mission. Together, we can tell more stories, build stronger communities, and make a real difference. Support the Cross Border Network now. Visit www.crossborderinterviews.ca today. Trevor, Brett, thank you both for sitting down with me and talking about this partnership that Great Falls Development Alliance and Economic Development Lethbridge have been in for the last few months since May of 2024. And I want to start by going back to that signing of that MOU between your two organizations before we get into the crux of what has transpired since May. And Brett, as this is your first time on the show, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. How did this partnership between Great Falls Development uh, Alliance and Economic Development Lethbridge come about?
Well, I've had the pleasure of working in economic development down here in Great Falls for 18 years now. And it didn't take me very long when I began to realize how important the existing trade and business ties were between the Great Falls region and the Lethbridge region. Just in talking with businesses they were either shipping goods or bringing things in or had business arrangements as well as on the retail side of shopping back and forth and just personal entertainment and what have you. So we started to work with businesses in southern Alberta that had business operations here in our region to help them, as we do with all existing businesses. And it just kind of evolved over time. I joined the Economic Development Organization in Alberta, which is an excellent trade association, and met Trevor and his group along the way, and realized that we approach economic development in much the same way, which to me is all about adding value to businesses and entrepreneurs. So it just kind of evolved from there.
Picking up on that, Trevor, what value does this partnership add to both organizations and to both regions that wasn't there prior to May of 2024? Because that's one thing that everyone would ask, I'm assuming would ask right after a signing like this is what is the benefits? What is the thing that is this partnership is going to increase for the two regions? From your perspective, what was that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, clearly there was a lot of cross-border shopping, a lot of cross-border tourism, lots of kind of, cross-border trade that occurred well before Brett and I ever had a brilliant idea to make that more formal. And, that's unlikely to change whether or not there was an MOU in place. But what I think it does is provide some structure and some formality to it. So as an example, both of our organizations have indicated we'd like to be a soft landing spot. So for example, if there's a Southern Alberta business that's looking to expand into the US market, maybe they're not sure how to navigate, they want a place to start. Great Falls is a great place to do that. And now they've got a contact, they've got an instant network of resources. And similarly, for Montana businesses that are looking to perhaps expand into Canada or do business in Canada where they haven't had a presence, they've now got a friendly organization that they can connect with. And so it gives each organization sort of that reach across the border to support their own stakeholders, but also open up new possibilities and new partnerships. And what we've been really striving for is okay, we've got a memorandum of understanding between our two organizations, but there's a chamber of commerce in each community. Is there opportunities to learn from each other? There's a downtown business revitalization type organization in each community. There are post-secondary institutions. So, the long-term goal is really to look at this as a true cross-border collaboration, a real corridor, if you will, with Great Falls on one end and Lethbridge on the other as the anchors, and to try and figure out how we evolve that and grow that. It's a pretty unique piece of geography, and we have a pretty unique relationship relative to many other cross-border communities. And so this was the tool, if you will, to sort of formalize that process and say, no, we're committed to this. Here it is in writing. And now we want to explore what other things can we do.
I think this is the first episode that I've ever recorded in the 5 years of doing this where I'm going to be sick and tired of hearing cross border because that is the name of my network. But here we are. I guess it's some good self publicity at the exact same time. Going back to you, Brett, we are now roughly almost a year into this first MOU. How's it been? Looking back on it, going into potentially year two as of May, has there been highlights for this partnership that you can look back and say, even if we don't get anything else done by May, we got this done? What's that thing that you look at and say, this has been the benefit of this cross-border partnership between your two organizations?
Well, there's been several. One is just learning from different team members of Economic Development Lethbridge and our team down here. You know, one of the great things about being a border region is that across the border, everything is very different, and yet we're all dealing with the exact same issues. Just we're so there's a lot to learn. You don't learn by going to someone who's doing things exactly the same way you do. So we've learned some things. Another is that we've been looking at exploring and made some progress in exploring some marketing opportunities that if, for example, if we're looking to attract a food or agricultural processor, we can say, well, it's not just our region. The region is actually larger, and we don't really care which side of the border you locate on, as long as we want to use our agricultural product that's produced in this larger region. And also just the notoriety of having a partnership across border to get the attention of site selection consultants and different companies. And then thirdly, I think the MOU was an action of not just Trevor and myself and our teams, but our stakeholders, those that we report to that invest in the economic development efforts. So formalizing it in an MOU gives kind of an official stamp that says, hey, we're going to work together over the long term to try to strengthen both of our communities and regions.
Same question to you, Trevor. How has this partnership in the last year benefited the Lethbridge region, the economic development team, the economic development Lethbridge team over the last year? What are the benefits that you have seen from that Canadian perspective?
Well, as Brett mentioned, you look at how another organization that's doing similar work, there are differences between our two organizations in terms of how they're funded, how they're structured, and our mandates. But, economic development, the basics, whether it's workforce, whether it's site selection, all of those things are essentially, very similar. So when our staff members, my team, can go down and meet their counterparts and just understand what's working well, what are the best practices? There's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of things that apply to both organizations. And so I think that's been interesting work to understand what we do differently, what we do similarly, where those best practices come from. I mean, we have, some similar challenges. Lethbridge and Great Falls are relatively small communities relative to other major urban areas. So we both have that working against us in some ways, although we're more nimble and we can move faster than larger centers. So it is a tactical advantage. But we also have, the challenge of being sort of more remote geographically, right? We're not on sort of major thoroughfares other than this north-south Canamex corridor. So that was really part of the impetus as well. Is like, okay, we know we have this corridor. We both have the same challenges around our relative size and our relative geographic locations. Are there things we can build on coming out of that? And I think the discussions over the last year since we signed the MOU have really underscored there are way more similarities than there are differences, and our approaches are similar. And we're looking to sort of how do we have more bang for our buck by working together? And I think there's a real unique opportunity, and the MOU has just highlighted that even more so.
I should mention, and I should have mentioned this before the interview started, but if you want to jump in after someone says something, feel free to do that because I have a lot of questions. But if you have something to add on to what either Trevor or Brett said, just don't be afraid to raise your hand and I'll throw it over to you. Okay. I want to throw it to Brett here for a second because after the MOU was signed last year, I was reading a news report. I think it was from CBS out of Great Falls. I could be wrong here, but one of your staff members at the Alliance was talking about one of the key areas that this MOU was going to be focusing on in the first early days was, as you just mentioned, agriculture and bioprocessing businesses. How did the agriculture and bioprocessing community respond to this new sort of open access to sort of start conversations on both sides of the border in Montana and in Great Falls? Was there an overwhelming support or was there sort of hesitation to expand into Canada?
Yeah, no, there was quite a bit of excitement. There were some comments of it's about time because uh, they've long the agricultural regions are similar yet different. So there's been a lot of ties back and forth. I think in agricultural processing more than in practically any other industry. So it's Trevor mentioned we're competing when we're trying to attract business investment into the region that's going to create high wage career opportunities for local businesses, tax base, and what have you. We're competing globally, and it is a disadvantage when someone's looking at coming to North America. If they would rattle off 100 metro areas that they would consider first, we probably wouldn't. Neither of us would make the list. So working
So
together,
how
we
do you
think that.
make the list? Sorry, I apologize to interrupt, but how do you make the list in 2025? Because it's going to be a challenging few years heading into the next decade, and I'm just going to say that openly. But how do you get that win? How do you get people to start looking at these more smaller economic powerhouses like Great Falls and Lethbridge?
Well, I think both of our organizations are constantly reaching out, targeting companies to go talk to that we think would be a good fit for the region, developing relationships with site selection consultants, working with existing businesses to ask them, hey, what business would complement your business here? Because we're trying to strengthen and grow the overall economy, talking with farmers and ranchers because they're shipping their goods somewhere. Can we make a business case of doing at least the first ingredient processing here, or all the way to a finished good? So it's a lot of market research and then reaching out.
Trevor, for yourself, when this MOU was signed, as I was just talking about, the agriculture and bioprocessing sector was the key priority for Great Falls Development Alliance. What was the priority for economic development Lethbridge? Was it agriculture as well? Because your region and also Great Falls region is very agriculturally heavy, and the food industry in both areas right now is expanding at a rate that I've never seen. What was the priority for Lethbridge in that first early days? And do you think you've accomplished it almost 10 months in?
Yeah, for us, two key sectors, certainly agri-food processing is one. We lovingly refer to this region as Canada's premier food corridor. With the hashtag, if you're in the business of food, you should be here. And so looking at opportunities to continue to grow the strength of the corridor and the industry that's here, that was one, certainly. And I think there's natural alignment with Great Falls. The second piece for us is something we call Canada's Western Gateway. And for us, it's Highway 4. For them, it's the Interstate 15. But it's this north-south corridor. So it is a direct shot from Alberta down into, all the way through to the southern U.S. It is the major north-south corridor. And from a Lethbridge perspective, the Coots Sweetgrass border crossing is the only 24/7 commercial crossing into Alberta or out of Alberta. And Lethbridge sits at, sort of the gateway of that. So for us, understanding transportation, logistics, warehousing, that's a sector we want to continue to build. And that, of course, the vast majority of Canada's exports, and Alberta's no different, travel into the US. And so us understanding how we could continue to be that gateway and build out the gateway only makes sense then to work with the folks that are, just down the road from where the gateway begins and try to establish some synergies there.
Now, Trevor would know this, but I'm not breaking any bubbles. But I focus a lot on municipalities and what's going on municipally across Canada. I've had the pleasure to go down across the border, the Sweetgrass Coots border, and visit Shelby, visit Toole County, and I chatted with a few of the commissioners in Toole County because I'm one of those people that likes to look for swag. What what benefits do these smaller communities along that Great Falls Lethbridge corridor receive in this partnership? Or is it just looking after Great Falls and Lethbridge and you'll just get the runoff from the benefits that we receive? Or do you have ongoing conversations with these smaller communities along that corridor? Brett?
Well, our organization focuses on the Great Falls trade area, which is 13 counties up to the border. So we're working with businesses and communities all along what we call the High Line, the Route 2 corridor that runs east-west in Montana. Within that region, we are agnostic as to where a business chooses to invest. The more options that we have, the more likely we're going to get them to invest here. Shelby has a rail industrial park that we market all the time. We're hoping that this will help existing businesses and attract more investment throughout the region. Agriculture is on our side of the border, and I think Trevor might agree with me, is subject to conditions beyond their control. So we have global commodity prices, we have weather and things like that. So we're hoping to provide more processing opportunities that diversify markets for farmers and ranchers, that lowers their shipping costs, lowers their market risk, and they end up with more money in their pockets. And we can tell in Great Falls when the Golden Triangle is having a good farm year, a good ranching year, we can tell it whether people are getting new knees or they're buying new trucks or they're dining out more often. Our biggest economy here in Great Falls is being the service center for the agricultural region. So the health of that region, the economic health of that region is very important.
Going back to
Yeah.
the agriculture. So, oh, go ahead, Trevor, and then I'll throw in the next question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for us, it's very, very similar. So we're just working on updating a trade area study, and roughly 20,000 people per day from the outside region come into Lethbridge every day for work. So that's the daily impact. But of course, we are a regional service center as well. So very much similar. What happens in the outlying communities very much affects the economy of the city and vice versa. And specific to the Canada's Western Gateway project, that Highway 4 corridor, each of the municipalities along that corridor are in fact, signed on to be part of that initiative and are paying to be part of the initiative and contributing to the project. So they're directly tied to that specific priority.
I want to talk about a resource that we don't often talk about on this show, but it is important to the agriculture community, and that is water. We are seeing lower water levels than we have in southern Alberta. I know there's been some concerns in even the northern part of Montana around water levels. How does your organizations, or do your organizations, talk to government agencies and policymakers about how they can help in this partnership to benefit not only the business community, but also the farmers who are looking for more water or potential more access to infrastructure in their communities? Trevor, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean the most recent example last year, I think, is the Milk River Basin and the diversion that moves water into Canada from the U.S. There's a water sharing agreement in place. That infrastructure failed, and so there's been a lot of conversation about the need to invest more in infrastructure. And I give credit to the state of Montana and all of the stakeholders down there who worked very quickly. It's a massive undertaking, a very complex project, but it's on budget and ahead of schedule to restore that water diversion to support southern Alberta and the water basin. You know, Southern Alberta clearly has had a long history of drought-like conditions from time to time, and I think it's part of the reason there's been such a heavy investment over the last 100 years in irrigation. Another $1 billion announced in the last couple of years to add another 200,000 acres of irrigated land in our region. We understand the importance of that and likely the continuing importance as climate change changes conditions for growers. But it really did force the government of Alberta to come together with stakeholders across the whole province around water sharing agreements and water license. Alberta has some challenges with its water licensing and allocation system. And so rather than tackle that, which have been, probably more problematic, municipalities in particular got together with other stakeholders, including the irrigation districts, and they have hammered out water sharing agreements that should there be droughts in the future, should there be major water restrictions required, that there's now documents in place to understand how that water is going to be allocated and shared that, quite frankly, didn't exist. Those documents didn't exist 2 years ago. And so the most recent threat of drought has at least prompted that sort of proactive approach and rethinking of how the system works. And so, like, if that's the silver lining that comes out of the challenge, but we will face water shortages in the future. I think irrigation efficiency, looking at water conservation is always going to be top of mind, and it's certainly something that comes up at our board meetings on a regular basis in terms of what's our role and how do we support that.
Brett, do you have anything to add on that?
Similar. It's similar down here. We've got very much the same climate. Water is precious. So our organization is a long supporter of infrastructure. I'm on the board of the Montana Infrastructure Coalition, and we were advocates of the federal infrastructure bill, which not just the Milk River, but the St. Mary Water Project. We've got some large regional water projects here, and it goes beyond water. One of the thinking back to your first question, one of the first times I really started spending time in Alberta was when we started supporting the development of the Montana-Alberta tie line, which runs from Lethbridge to Great Falls and connected the two electric grids. Well, now we have so many changes and increased demand on electric generation side that highway, rail, natural gas, electricity, oil pipelines between our state and the province of Alberta continue to grow in importance.
I want to talk about the policymakers, the municipal leaders, the mayors of both your communities of Lethbridge and Great Falls for a second. This partnership, it seems like you two get along quite well. Seems like you guys have both the best interests of both of your communities at heart, and you want to see this partner grow. How would you say the partnership between the two municipalities or the two areas, the two regions are outside of these two organizations? Would you say, because I know in the MOU, one of the agreements was you guys would meet on a regular basis to have discussions about the similarities and the challenges that you're both facing. Are your mayors meeting as well, or is it just a high level like you guys meeting? Brett?
Well, we kept it pretty small in the first few months, but we're planning to come up in April and bring the head of our tourism organization, the head of our chamber. I don't know if we'll get the mayor. He would like to come. If not, one of our city commissioners, city leaders. As Trevor mentioned, that the hope is that the benefits that we've seen in economic development, there can be similar benefits with multiple organizations. And there are so many ties back and forth already, but it's nice to foster those more the different similar organizations. We've also reached out and worked with Bev Thornton at Southwest Alberta, and had the pleasure of being up there several times. So we'll bring a group up in April. Trevor brought a group down here this last fall. So we'll hopefully this will continue to expand, and at this point in time, strengthening all those relationships, I think, is particularly important.
Trevor, do you have anything to add before I turn to my last subject, because I'm cautious of time here?
Yeah, I mean, Great Falls and Lethbridge have had a twinned relationship. So there is a twinning development society in Lethbridge that has a relationship with a similar group in Great Falls that's outside of the city, political and bureaucratic structure, but there are community links that exist. The two city councils have in the past had not quite a sister city relationship. There has been a partnership that's been identified, and I know Mayor Higgin from Lethbridge was in Great Falls over the summer and has met with his counterparts. So, I'm not aware of necessarily the number of meetings or how often those happen, but they do happen. I know there's definitely interest from our political leaders to continue to build on that for sure.
This partnership is great. It seems like it is going along and you guys are working collaboratively together. But I would not be doing my job if I did not talk about what's going on between our two countries. And that is between the
Is
federal.
there something I missed? Like,
Yeah,
did I
yeah, there
miss
might
another?
might have
What's
been
going
something
on?
that you might have missed. We are recording this in the second week of February, and come the beginning of March, Canada could see a 25% tariff on goods. That means agriculture products and all goods going in from Canada into the United States, and oil and gas, a 10% tariff on all oil and gas resources, I should say, going into the United States as well. I'm going to ask the very political question. I'm going to just rip the band-aid off and I'm going to start with you, Trevor, because I want to be nice to the guy who's on here for the first time. Trevor, how would this impact this relationship, this partnership between your two organizations?
Obviously, we have to be conscious of the political winds, and so that is not lost on me. We understand that, quite frankly, the trading relationship between Canada and the United States has changed, and in a fundamental way, and it may never be the same. Like, we can't minimize sort of the threats that have been made against Canadian sovereignty and sort of some of the comments that have been made around economic coercion and so forth. However, what I've said to my counterpart is that presidents come and go, as do political leaders of all stripes. And fundamentally, at its base, Alberta and Montana have a strong relationship. Canada is Montana's largest trading partner. So Montana exported about $1 billion worth of stuff to Canada last year. And Montana, in terms of imports from Canada, that number is almost 5.6 billion. So there is a very strong, healthy relationship between those two jurisdictions. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. So it's incumbent on us, frankly, to continue to see how we build those partnerships, how we strengthen them, irrespective of what's going on around us. I have to be the optimist and think that things will get better and that, the political stuff will get resolved by the people that need to resolve it. And at the same time, if I can meet with Montana business folks, if I can meet with political leaders in Montana, educate them about the impact tariffs have, hopefully have a positive impact that changes how they think about it, and in turn, they communicate that to their representatives. I mean, it's obviously very complex. And to your point, we actually don't yet know what the impacts will be. We don't yet know whether tariffs will or will not be in place, on what goods, at what level. Will Canada retaliate, on what goods, at what level? We have to be prudent. We have to proactively think about those things. And certainly, I think this partnership arguably gives us even more opportunity to discuss those things together and understand how we might work together to either address those tariffs or solve some of those tariffs or work through that situation. So again, I think the partnership doesn't change just because there's a broader trade dispute going on between our two federal levels of government, but it certainly will color the conversation, and it certainly may change what we can and can't do. But again, I think it makes a lot of sense to carry forward and move forward.
Right. Do you have anything to add on that from a Montana slash United States perspective of how the tariffs could impact this partnership, but also that cross-border trade that is so detrimental to both sides of the border, Canada and the United States?
Well, I'm also an optimist. I think to be in economic development, you have to be an optimist and a pragmatist. So hopefully, any pain that our regions feel from this will be short-lived, and perhaps in the end, it strengthens our economies on both sides. We have to work with whoever the voters elect, whether it's locally or at the state level or federally. One of the most important things is that all of our existing businesses and farms and ranches are very precious. You don't replace them overnight. So if there are things that do damage them, what can we do jointly to help them survive and find a way and share that knowledge so we can inform our leaders on both sides of the border about what impacts are actually happening on the ground. We're both fairly far away from our national capitals. We're both kind of distanced or not the power bases when it comes to our state and provincial capital. But the one of the best ways is the two things we're going to focus on is how do we help our existing business people figure their way through whatever constant. I think we're going to be in a time of constant potential change here for a while. Hopefully, it's short-lived. But then also just convey what's really happening and what's important. There are some things that can be improved. I'd love to see the border crossing improved so that trade can flow and people can get back and forth, more freely. In the end, the optimist in me says, if it makes sense, if it makes business sense, that we can continue to work together and grow our economies. And I think history has proved that it does make sense.
One of the things that I hear from local leaders from across Canada and the few that I've chatted in the United States is municipalities are more reactive than proactive. And in this constant unknown state that we are currently in, because we do not know, like Trevor said, if the tariffs are coming in as of March, we just don't know. How are you being proactive in reaching out to the business community to let them understand the impacts that these tariffs could have on their businesses as well? Or are you taking a wait and seeing and then being reactive? Because you talk, Brett, about how you are talking to the state level governments, the local level of governments, but the business, which you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis, they're probably a little bit more worried about this as well because this could affect their livelihoods, especially the farmers and the ranchers. Brett, do you want to take that first?
Well, so our board of directors, we dedicated our December board meeting to looking at opportunities and threats because this our cross-border trade relationship is just one of the many potential changes that our business community and our communities need to try to look at the crystal ball and see about. I don't need to go tell the business community what the threats are to their business. It's the other way around. They know their business is a lot better. They can tell me exactly what it is. So it's more the opposite of listening to them, gathering that information and conveying it. We're not set up to do a lot of policy work. And what we do is more focused on the state and federal economic development programs and things like that. Our business community have their own trade associations in grains and in meats and things like that in different manufacturing industries. Um, so
I
I'm running
appreciate
out
that.
running out of what else I can say without.
No, and I'm going to throw it over to Trevor here then, because on our side of the border in Canada, I've chatted with you a few times. It's reactive than being proactive. Are you doing the same thing that Brett's doing in the Great Falls Development Alliance of listening to the businesses of what their concerns are about these potential threats? And as much as you can listen, you have to tell them something without just brushing them off and saying, "I've heard you. Now I'm just going to go away."
Yeah, so absolutely a lot of listening over the last number of weeks. We meet with the industry associations. So, Lethbridge Manufacturing Association met yesterday and provided us with some concrete feedback. We've got some conversations scheduled with the Construction Association here in the next little while. You know, thinking about your municipal hat and your municipal audience, my recommendation to municipalities would to be as proactive as possible. So if I wear my other hat that you've interviewed me under is from a Village of Sterling perspective, we are asking our administration to take a look at what does a loss in revenues look like. So if provincial revenues decline, if in the short term assessment values decline, what would a 5, 10, or 15% budget scenario look like? And what are some of those things so that when we get to that process in the fall, we've actually thought through. Hopefully it doesn't happen and hopefully it's not as severe as we plan, but I'd much rather plan for a worst case scenario than be surprised. And I think this whole trade conversation to an extent is there's been a lot of signals, there's been a lot of things sort of on the horizon. And if, it shouldn't have been a total surprise to anyone, frankly. And I think, again, from an economic development Lethbridge perspective, it is talking to industry, listening, understanding what their issues are, and how do we get in front of some of the things that could come without panicking, but also recognizing that we need to have a plan and we need to be working on strategies. And so, from a Lethbridge perspective, we'll be putting together a bit of a task force from community partners, different organizations that have agreed to partner with us, so that we've got a sort of a one place, one conduit to feed all of that information to, and then work with various levels of government and different agencies to sort of figure out what our strategies are moving forward. And there are definitely some levers we can pull. There are some things we can do to support the local business community, and that's, frankly, that's why we're here and that's why we exist. And so we'll get to work.
Okay, so I'm going to put on my economic development hat for a second for my last segment and go a little bit more optimistic than the last segment that we just talked about tariffs. So let's talk about the future and what's in store for this partnership and what the path forward is. Now, like I've said a few times, we're still in that first year after that MOU has been signed. What do your specific organizations hope to achieve from this organization by the end of the year one, by the end of year five, and by the end of year 10? So I'm going to start with Trevor on this one because I started with Brett on the last one. So, Trevor, what do you hope to achieve by the end of May, by the end of 2030, and by the end of 2040 from an
Yeah, I
economic
mean, I think
development Lethbridge?
Yeah, from a by the end of May, I mean that's not that far away in real terms. It's really just going to be an understanding of the current situation. I think having a partner in the U.S. to help us navigate, any potential tariffs is really important. And so there's going to be a lot more listening, as we've talked about, is the key activity between now and May. We do have the Great Falls delegation planning to come in April, so I think that's a great opportunity to hear firsthand, sort of the American perspective, if you will, on what's happening and how it unfolds by then, but also connecting those folks to local people here, their counterparts, chamber to chamber, tourism to tourism, and really have an opportunity to have some candid conversations and raise awareness. So by May, it's more about, I think it's just about dialogue. In terms of actual deliverables moving forward, I really hope, as Brett sort of mentioned, one of our goals is that when we go to market to meet with a site selector, or a company in Europe, for example, that we can be there side by side going, okay, we've got a Canadian solution for you, we've got an American solution for you. Here's the two different business cases. Here you go. You let us know what would work best, and that we truly are partners in building this region. I hope that's a tangible example of something that can take place. Similarly, renewable energy is something that has undergone some political strain on both sides of the border, but it is it's a significant opportunity. And so, regardless of the politics around renewables, we know that's a way of the future. We know that renewables are, they pay property taxes, they do deliver jobs. And so, again, if there's an integrated strategy, building on that Montana tie line, we know that there's a regional power solution, perhaps and that our organizations can help drive some of those conversations. Where are there good partnerships? And the classic example for me is the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park, right? It is a ridiculously popular tourist destination for both of our regions, and it does span the border and it is jointly managed. And there's lots of synergy that came out of that decision many decades ago. So, okay, there's a great example on the tourism hat. What else can we do that's similar, that has a significant impact in the same way? Maybe it's energy, maybe it's agriculture, maybe it's irrigation. But this silly little line that gets in the way, this 49th parallel is sometimes problematic, but you know, companies, frankly, commerce doesn't really care so much about those artificial boundaries. We have enormous potential in our region collectively. So what do those partnerships look like? That's really what the next 10 years looks like, is finding those niche opportunities and building them from my perspective.
Brett, from your perspective as Great Falls Development Alliance, what does the next year and what does the next 5 and 10 years look like for your organization and this partnership?
Well, I'm a Rotarian down here, so I'll stick with the International Peace Park. We do have the International Rotary Convention coming to Calgary later this year. I'm already hearing a lot of discussion. One of the reasons we forged this partnership is to help soft landings on both sides. I think we're going to have more of the businesses down here that are saying, I need to spend more time up there, or I might need to open up an office or do formalize a partnership with a business up there. There might be businesses in the Lethbridge region that are like, hey, I need to do an alliance back and forth. That's kind of short term. Definitely, in this next year, we want to jointly get into this marketing cachet, if you will, of this cross-border and use that to try to attract attention to our region. We've looked around at agricultural service center communities that are pursuing agro-processing, food processing. There's so many opportunities there, going beyond food to look at the whole, just taking this organic material, and some of it is the waste stream from the food processing that could go into biopackaging, bioplastics, biochemicals, a whole host of different opportunities. In Europe, the Netherlands are perhaps in the lead there of the value, the economic value that they add to their agricultural product before it leaves the country. There's a corridor in Iowa between Des Moines and Ames, Iowa, and I think it's called the Cultivation Corridor. And they are not talking about food processing. They are talking about enzymes and all kinds of pretty interesting things. So I think there's tremendous opportunities for our combined region, and I just think there's strength in continuing to work together as we explore those opportunities. Um, uh, we have a housing need here. I know housing is a critical thing. So we're looking at what can we learn from how your communities have dealt with housing. So I think longer term, getting our municipalities, getting our chambers of commerce, getting our different agricultural associations, the border, and I think it's more acute of a problem down here that the border becomes an artificial kind of just barrier, and more kids go across the border for sports and things like that. We're coming across the border because before coming to Montana, we lived in Maine, and we were a 4-hour drive from Montreal. And when our kids were small, taking them to a foreign country was a lot of fun. It was an adventure, and we ended up having a statewide sharing agreement between Maine and Quebec, where it got to be upwards of a couple hundred business and community leaders would go up to Quebec in the fall, and in the spring they would send a similar group down, and some things happen quickly, and some things relationships needed to develop. but there were a lot of business partnership arrangements that were formed out of that. And these relationships, when we do have challenges or opportunities, these relationships really are incredibly valuable.
They certainly are, and I think that's the best way to end this interview by the very first time ever on this show saying that Canada is a foreign country. Didn't think that this would happen in 2025, but here we are. I never thought of America as a foreign country, but I guess I have to now. To learn more about Great Falls Development Alliance and the Economic Development Lethbridge, the links will be in the show notes, or you can visit crossborderinterviews.ca and check out the links in the show notes there as well. Trevor, Brent, thank you so much for doing this. Brett, sorry, not Brent. Brent, thank you so much for doing this. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking time to talk about this amazing cross-border partnership. And I hope this continues to thrive because we need it in a time of uncertainty. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. We hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite platform or follow us online at Cross Border Networks on any of the social media platforms. For even more content and learn more of the stories and the people that we feature on this show, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us. So share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with another episode of Municipal Affairs next week. Till then, everyone.